Welcome to VUCA Africa. I'm Jerry Elston. Baby to Mom is an egg donation agency which was initiated in 2007 in an effort to address the plight of infertile people. They assist with egg donations and they provide an affordable and efficient egg donation program. I have in the studio with me Jenny Curry, who is the founder and egg donator coordinator, who will now discuss with us what it's like on the other side of the donation process. The donor, of course, as we said, altruistic ideas, thinking that the idea of having eggs and being able to assist someone else start a family is noble and for some absolutely necessary. And I'm pretty certain that the recipient feels special, this gift that they're being given. But let's talk about that person or that couple now. I mean, who is it who comes for egg donation?
Well, recipients are persons who need donor eggs for a variety of reasons. It could be that they are in premature ovarian failure, or they're in menopause, or they have a predisposition to carrying a genetic deformity which they don't want to carry on, so they're looking for healthier genes with which to reproduce.
I didn't know that women in menopause can still have babies.
Essentially, in menopause, the ovaries have stopped working, so the ovarian reserve is either depleted or it's not working anymore. But if the uterus is still intact, then that recipient can still carry a baby.
Well, that's great information. I didn't understand that. And then, of course, there's the genetic issues that people have. Of course, you need to know that it's on the side of the mother.
That's right.
In order to donate the egg.
To receive the egg.
To receive the egg.
Yes. Yes, and
okay.
they generally know these things. It's not the most common form of recipients needing donor eggs, but it has happened occasionally that they know that they're carrying a specific gene, or that the recipient, being the lady, has suffered from some ailment or issue during her life, and she doesn't want to reproduce that issue or recreate that
to a child.
Yes.
And then, of course, the most common are couples who just have not been able to have children, infertile.
Well, it's not really quite as clear-cut as that, because infertility in itself is quite a broad topic. So persons only look to egg donation when there's an issue with the ovary,
okay,
or with the ovarian reserve, if it's depleted, or if they're absent, or if they're of poor quality, or if every time the recipient is trying to produce eggs, the eggs simply don't fertilize. So under the guidance of a fertility specialist, they would know when they need donor eggs.
Now, Jenny, by the time someone gets to you, a couple, I'd like to imagine that it's not, that sometimes it's just the woman, but often it is, they're couples. By the time they get to you, I'm going to assume they've gone through fertility treatments and they've gone through one and more to attempt to get pregnant.
It could be that they actually haven't had any treatments because they've maybe struggled to conceive, or there's no menstrual cycle, which is indicative of normal fertility, and that they haven't conceived. And when they've visited a fertility specialist, they've been advised that the lady is simply not ovulating. So the only way to conceive is with a donor. And so they need not have even tried any other forms of treatment, because they know they have to try with an egg donation program.
Because egg donation has never been perceived as a part, the natural birthing process, and even when you do discover infertility, it's not the first thing that comes to mind. By the time they get to you, what is the emotional state?
Very often recipients are very emotional. So it actually, in essence, there's a grieving process that a recipient has to go through before they're ready to accept the process of moving forward with egg donation. And that's really grieving for their own eggs. They're grieving for that loss. And when they have dealt with that and they're ready to move past that, then they're really ready to proceed with the next step.
I can almost get that. It's that a little girl who looks like me, or has my...
part of me.
Yes, or my traits, or speaks like me, a little boy who looks like my father, or whatever. But also that has the connection to me genetically, isn't it?
That's part of me. It's a little piece that I created and I produced, and it's my offspring.
Yeah.
And once a recipient has moved past that stage, then they're ready, and it's like a fresh start. It's a new chapter, and there's an air of excitement because now it's exciting to find a person who resembles me in some way and who is like me. And then there's the whole excitement and hope that this can work, and maybe this is the answer to why I wasn't previously able to conceive, and it can actually work. It's not a dead end. I can still conceive.
Now, very important, this is not a one-person process. I mean, it takes more than one person to make a baby.
That's right. There's the
Talk to
man
us about the
involved.
partner.
Yeah, well, essentially there's three aspects that contribute to a successful pregnancy or a baby being created, and that's the egg aspect, which we've discussed, and then there's the sperm, and of course the uterus. So before treatment can commence, these three aspects have to be considered carefully to make sure that each contribution is optimal to help the process.
So one of the first things you do is check the uterus. Very, very important.
That's right.
The next phase, of course, is understanding that the sperm is in fact what it's meant to be.
Healthy and strong and sufficient numbers, and fertility specialists can also advise on that. And if there are challenges in that department, they also have the means to address it. If sometimes they would take an individual sperm and inject it into an egg instead of simply putting the sperm together with the eggs.
So then you go into the lab and it's put together, and now the real process begins. But let's just talk a little bit about the female recipient or the couple's relationship to the donor itself.
Well, there is no relationship. That relationship is managed or facilitated through the agent. So they don't know who this person is. They've identified a donor based on her traits. And for each recipient, the traits that they look for are different. It could be physical traits, or it could be specific interests, or an affinity for intelligence or something like that. So they select the donor if there are childhood pictures based on these childhood pictures of the donor.
Interesting.
And of course her profile, which she's written up about herself. But they would never see an adult picture of the donor. So in a fertility clinic, a donor and a recipient might sit right next to each other.
And not know.
And not know that they're actually in this process together. It's actually very special because very often there is a bond that you can't describe. But things that are quite special for me would be, I would get a letter from a donor which she would like to forward to a recipient, and at the same time I get incoming communication from the recipient that she's thinking of her donor.
Oh, wow.
So it's just there's a bond that's not always defined.
So tell me a little bit about how you file them. You just said they come in and you request that they bring in pictures of themselves as children, so
Yes.
So that the likely parents would understand and see what it is that they look like as a child.
That's right. And sometimes, unfortunately, they don't have these pictures. So recipients make choices just on a description.
You said something like some parents are looking for very particular traits. Would it, for example, the donor played piano as a child? Would it mean that it's because the mother played piano that she's looking for someone who has something similar?
Sometimes they do. They're looking for maybe an affinity towards music. We had one recipient who was very specific about wanting the donor to have strong dancing experience. So she eventually proceeded with a donor who excelled in dancing as a child.
That is interesting. I just didn't realize, and probably that's not common. I mean, the shopping list is not very common. Most people are emotionally attached to having a child, and does it sometimes not matter?
Everybody's really very different, so it's every situation is different. Most people select the donor based on a physical trait, because that's the key thing, and really what happens in life and what happens in childhood is influenced by the environment and is influenced by the interests of the family. So if the physical traits are a strong one, then that child matches and resembles the family, and so they carry on. But sometimes people ponder longer and they're looking for something else, so they're wanting a deeper connection, they're wanting something. I had a recipient on the weekend who selected her donor because she goes to the same type of church as her.
Interesting. The reason I find it so interesting is we don't know how our children are going to turn out, even if when they're our biological kids. So that's intriguing.
Very true.
Talk to me a little bit about the profiles that are put together. I mean, if, for example, someone comes and they want strong dancing background or something like that, how do you then find these people? Because what are the chances of you having someone with a very particular trait on your books?
The chances are quite high, actually.
Really?
Because we've got a lot of people who come forward and volunteer as donors. So the recipients have quite an extensive database of donors to choose from. And because everybody's different, everybody's looking for someone different in a donor. So that if they're looking for someone with whose ability to play a specific musical instrument, or who excelled at school or studying medicine, we're likely to help them find the right person.
How large a database is there?
There's hundreds of donors,
Yeah.
but it's also a live database. So the process really is, once a person asks a donor to donate to them through me, then it's a process of still confirming that donor's availability and suitability. Maybe her circumstances have changed and she may be pregnant, or her relationship statuses don't really provide for her to donate anymore, or maybe her health has changed. So there are a lot of people, but prior to confirming every donation, there's a lot of checking, and then things change all the time. But the new donors come on board every day, really.
Tell me about the amount of organizations such as yours in the country. Because is it a fairly new type thing, or is there in fact a national network?
Well, I think egg donation has increased in acceptance in the last couple of years. And that's also because there's more awareness around it. There's more communication. So the more communication, the more people grow to understand it, and therefore are willing to help from a
Okay.
perspective of an egg donor. From the recipient side, it's also grown in popularity because there are the means to help these people, because the donors have come forward. So a couple of years back when I first started, there was a process of recipients actually had to go on a waiting list.
Oh wow, yeah.
I would have a waiting list of recipients, and as donors became available, then I could say to them, this is the new profile, are you interested? This is the new one, are you looking for this kind of a person? Whereas now that's not the case anymore. There's no waiting list, and people can look at donors, they can look at the availability, and they can make a decision.
And it's really about awareness, isn't it? It's about education and understanding, because once you understand, because there are people who will say, oh, I'm not doing that. My goodness, these are my eggs. And that's been part of the controversy around the issue.
Completely. In fact, the response of people has changed towards egg donation as a topic quite considerably. Years back, people would maybe respond not so favorably when I was appealing to people to donate their eggs or to consider egg donation, and I was fraught and met with a lot of comments, which were quite negative. Whereas now, actually, people are saying positive and wonderful things. They're saying, thank you for doing this, and that's such a great and noble cause, and it's great that there are institutions like yourselves.
Well, isn't it, Jenny, that it's on the one end, it's with adoption, for example, it's giving a child a gift of a life in a family. With egg donation, it's giving a couple a gift of conceiving a child that will be theirs.
That's exactly what it is, and it's also it's an answer, and it's helping to heal. I had a situation recently which was very special, so I'd like to share if you don't mind.
Yes.
The lady, I asked her to donate, and the couple had asked her to choose for her to be their donor. And she was so delighted and she was so excited, and she said she's going through such a low in her life, and someone had passed on in her family that was close, and she was feeling flat and she didn't have the energy to wake up, and now she felt like she's got a purpose and she has this excitement that's going on. So it was incredible, because someone else's pain was actually helping her. And the healing for her was their solution. It's incredible.
We've been chatting to Jenny Curries, the founder of Baby to Mom. Egg donation is something that is not much spoken about, but it is very much a part of what is happening within the fertility and motherhood space within South Africa. The agency assists with egg donation and IVF treatments. They're extensively experienced with all matters pertaining to egg donation, very latest legal aspects regarding surrogacy in South Africa, and that's something we must discuss when we come back.
Confidential. Human tissue is confidential, and it's
Baby to Mom has facilitated egg donation treatments across South Africa and, in fact, the world. People throughout the world are really desperate to be able to conceive children, and you can just look at the websites that are dedicated to looking at this exact issue. Now, while egg donation is in fact one thing, there is the issue of surrogacy. My first question, however, on donation is, we all have eggs as women, or most of us, for most of our lives. At some point, however, they are depleted, and for some reason or another, it becomes necessary that if I want to conceive a child, I need to find an egg elsewhere, which those women then come to an organization or a company such as yours. But who ensures that those eggs are not, I don't know what the word is, misused?
Well, it's a professional process in South Africa. Egg donation is first and foremost ethical and professional. And there's a lot of effort that's gone into some guidelines that encourage these ethics. So egg donation agents have to confirm that they adhere to some guidelines which keep the process ethical and above board. And fertility clinics are only encouraged to work with agents who confirm these ethics.
So we're actually looking for what may be accredited egg donation organizations.
Correct. Well, it's essentially that there's no formal process of monitoring this. It's just about being professional and confirming that you adhere to these guidelines.
And ensuring that the donor's information, as well as, in fact, the fact that an egg donation has taken place, is not exposed to anyone.
That's correct. It's not the donor's confidential details are not violated in any way. And there's a lot of controls in place, and there's a lot of bodies that support this process. So there's a comfortable professional process that happens around the psychologist and the fertility clinic and the agent in terms of communicating the process and how everything gets how everything gets started.
Is there something called a motherhood agreement?
There is something called a motherhood agreement that's on the surrogacy side.
Yes, let's get into surrogacy actually,
right.
now that you've mentioned it, because that is not egg donation.
Sometimes it can include egg donation,
Yes.
but it's a completely different topic.
All right.
So if the egg donation were involved, it would happen in its own rights along the lines that we've just discussed. But a surrogate motherhood agreement is a legal agreement that needs to be ratified by the High Courts.
Ooh, so hold on. If I want to go into the surrogacy process, I've tried egg donation, my body doesn't seem to be acting the way I would will it to, and I do choose a surrogate. The process is a legal one.
Well, first and foremost, a recipient needs to have a medical necessity that is permanent before she can proceed with the surrogate. So it's not just a decision of I'd like to proceed or I've struggled, therefore I think I need a surrogate. It needs to, and some of those medical necessities include a full hysterectomy or an inability to carry a baby to term, or where the life of the carrying mother would be compromised, or in the case of a single man or a gay couple. So in those cases they would look to a surrogate mother. There's certain requirements that need to be supported for the agreement to be confirmed.
Yes.
And then these requirements, along with the actual contract, are submitted to the High Court. And the High Courts have the final decision of approving this contract.
Wow, this is even more intricate than a full adoption then.
It's a very, very intricate process, and it differs from adoption in some regards, in that with the adoption, as far as I know, that the mother has the opportunity to change her mind.
That's right.
2 months post the birth.
Yes.
Whereas with the surrogate agreements, the birth mother cannot change her mind because that court order is binding and holding, and the commissioning parents, as they're called, have full legal rights and responsibilities of that child. So once the baby is born, there's no further adoption or legalities required.
Do you have any information on when this happened? Because I remember watching a very emotional movie some years ago about a mother who didn't want to give up the child, and I'm sure these were rules that pretty much had to come into play as the process was going, because it's emotional for both sides.
Very. This was promulgated on the 1st of April 2010. So it's been in force for a couple of years, and there are some aspects which are quite challenging. But in many ways, everybody knows where they stand, and they're happy to proceed with it.
Who is the surrogate mother? I mean, are there criteria? Would she have had a child before she can surrogate, or is it just anyone?
Some of the criteria for a surrogate mother is that she has to have one living child. She must also have South African domicilium.
Yes.
For a commissioning parent, if you want to go on that side,
yes,
they also need to have South African domicilium, or one of the commissioning parents has to have South African domicilium, which is the intent to permanently live in South Africa. They need to have a situation which is irreversible and a medical necessity to proceed.
Yes.
They also may not proceed with 3 third parties. So we've spoken about the egg donation.
Yes.
So they may not proceed if there's a need for egg donation and sperm donation and surrogacy.
Okay, break that down for me.
We spoke about
I lost you somewhere.
Okay. The 3 parties that really contribute to a conception. That's really the egg, the sperm, and the uterus.
The sperm and the uterus.
So in the case of surrogacy, there's inevitably a problem with the uterus.
Right.
So that's the surrogate addresses the uterine aspect.
Yes.
So in the case of, for example, a single man, and we have a lot of single men actually.
Yeah.
They would need the help of an egg donor, the anonymous egg donor, and a surrogate.
Yes.
So my first point that I say to these people when I meet with them is that they need to be tested first, because if they are found to be infertile, that would be the end of the road for them, because they need to be able to contribute their genetics.
They must be able to. There has to be one parent who is giving genetically participating in the process.
Well, not necessarily genetically. If, for example, a recipient was able to carry, but she had poor eggs,
yes,
or an absence, so she needed an egg donor, and her partner also needed a sperm donor, they would be able to proceed with the surrogate process. because there's no genetic link, but there's 2 third parties, not 3.
Okay, all right. It's a way more emotional process than adoption. As you know, as excessive or as emotional as discovering that you're unable to carry a child is. I don't know what it might be like for a woman to watch someone else carry their child.
It is. It's very, very emotional, and there's a lot of counseling, and a psychological assessment plays a huge role in the surrogacy screening, if you want to call it that, or preparation. So they really need to be emotionally ready, but it's like the egg donation, it's also a solution, and it's an option that's available.
And you have to remain positive.
If there are no other avenues.
However, the psychological issues aren't on one side of the scale. That's the thing with surrogacy. It's on the part of the mother who, the woman who is going to carry and conceive on your behalf, but also as on the part of the recipient family, because pregnancy in itself is an emotional event.
Completely. And not only with the surrogate mother, you also need the support and participation of the surrogate's partner.
Oi.
So the contract...
Haven't even thought about that.
The contract that is ratified includes the surrogate's partner, because he's party or she is party to the life and needs to be able to commit and support and play an informed role, or an important role.
Wow. Jenny Curry, the founder of Baby to Mom here, as well as Egg Donor Coordinator. You can go to their website, it's Baby to Mom, if you want to find out more about egg donation as well as third-party reproduction. This is an agency that allows for highly affordable egg donation programs with world-class services. Now, I would just like to say that to some it might seem that VUCA Africa this morning was dealing with a really soft issue. Childbirth, child rearing, being able to conceive is not a soft issue. It doesn't matter who you are. Once you get to a point where either as a man or as a woman you have made a decision that you would like to start a family, when it gets to the point where it is discovered that you are unable to conceive your own children, for example, it becomes a hugely traumatic and emotional event. It gets in the way of being able to function in society, be it productively in your workplace or in fact in your social circles or your community. And so if there are options, why not take a look at them? This morning, for example, we discussed adoption, a real issue and a real option for us if in fact that is your choice. But we've also discussed egg donation as well as surrogacy. So two issues, these last two ones, which can be pretty controversial depending on who you are, but options all the same. Thank you for watching VUCA.